Dr. Ethan Cross adjusted his lab coat as he walked through the gleaming corridors of the research vessel Nexus. The joint human-alien facility floated peacefully in the void between Earth and the Velani homeworld, a testament to the fragile but growing alliance between their species. 6 months had passed since first contact, and Ethan still marveled at the advanced technology surrounding him. Crystalline walls pulsed with bioluminescent energy, and the artificial gravity felt slightly different from Earth normal, giving everything a dreamlike quality. As the station's lead xenobiologist, Ethan had expected to study alien plant samples and atmospheric compositions. What he hadn't expected was to be assigned as a cultural liaison to the most stunning being he'd ever encountered. The message on his tablet was simple enough. Report to Lab 7 for interspecies biological consultation with researcher Zephyra. The U name meant nothing to him then. Meeting the ethereal scientist Lab 7 was larger than the human sections, designed to accommodate Velani preferences for open spaces and soft lighting. As Ethan stepped through the entrance, his breath caught in his throat. The Velani scientist stood with her back to him, studying a holographic display of human cellular structures. Her form was unmistakably feminine, yet elegantly alien, with translucent skin that seemed to glow from within. Delicate veins of silver light traced patterns across her arms and neck, pulsing gently like a living constellation. "Dr. Cross, I presume?" Her voice was like liquid music, carrying harmonics that resonated in his chest. When she turned to face him, Ethan felt his professional composure falter. Her eyes were large and luminous, shifting between shades of deep amber and gold. Her features were delicately angular with high cheekbones and full lips that curved in what might have been curiosity or amusement. "Yes, that's me," Ethan managed, extending his hand in greeting. "And you must be Zephyra." She regarded his outstretched hand with scientific interest before carefully taking it. Her skin was warm and impossibly soft, with a texture like silk that had been kissed by starlight. The contact sent an unexpected jolt of electricity through him, and he noticed her luminescent patterns brighten slightly at the touch. "Fascinating," she murmured, not immediately releasing his hand. "Your species' greeting rituals involve direct, physical contact. Quite remarkable, considering what I've learned about human neural responses to touch." The research begins. Ethan found himself drawn into Zephyra's world of scientific inquiry over the following days. She had been assigned to study human reproductive biology as part of the cultural exchange program, and her approach was refreshingly direct. Unlike human scientists who might dance around sensitive topics, she asked questions with the straightforward curiosity of someone studying any other biological process. "Explain to me," she said during one of their sessions, her golden eyes fixed intently on his face, "why humans require emotional attachment for optimal reproductive success. My research indicates that your species forms long-term pair bonds that extend far beyond the breeding cycle." Ethan cleared his throat, trying to maintain professional distance despite the way her gaze seemed to see right through him. "Well, from an evolutionary perspective, emotional bonding serves several purposes. It encourages cooperative child rearing, provides psychological stability, and strengthens social structures. But you also derive pleasure from the process itself," Zephyra continued, tilting her head in that characteristic way he was beginning to find endearing. "Independent of reproduction. This suggests that physical intimacy serves functions beyond genetic propagation." "That's correct," Ethan replied, feeling heat rise in his cheeks. "Human sexuality is complex, involving emotional, physical, and psychological components." Zephyra leaned forward slightly, her luminescent patterns pulsing with what he was learning, indicated heightened interest. "And this pleasure response, it requires specific techniques, particular forms of touch." Growing attraction as days turned into weeks, their professional discussions began to carry undercurrents of something deeper. Ethan found himself looking forward to their meetings with an intensity that went beyond academic interest. Zephyra's alien beauty was undeniable, but it was her brilliant mind and infectious curiosity that truly captivated him. She began asking more personal questions, her scientific inquiry blending with what seemed like genuine interest in him as an individual. Do you experience this emotional bonding yourself, Ethan? She asked one evening as they worked late in the lab. Have you formed pair bonds with members of your species? I have, he admitted, though he found it difficult to concentrate with her sitting so close. Her skin seemed to glow brighter in the dim laboratory lighting, and he caught hints of a subtle fragrance that reminded him of ozone and flowers. Though nothing long-term. My work has always come first. How unfortunate, Zafira said softly. From my observations, humans seem to flourish when they have strong emotional connections. You appear lonely. The word hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither dared to voice. Ethan met her gaze and saw something there that went beyond scientific curiosity. There was warmth, understanding, and something else that made his pulse quicken. The proposal. It was during their third week of collaboration that Zafira made the suggestion that would change everything. They had been discussing the neurochemical aspects of human attraction when she suddenly went quiet, her luminescent patterns shifting to deeper, warmer hues. Ethan, she said carefully, her musical voice carrying a note of uncertainty he'd never heard before. I have a proposal that may seem unconventional. I'm listening, he replied, though his heart was already racing at her serious tone. My research has provided me with extensive theoretical knowledge about human reproductive behavior, she continued, her amber eyes fixed on his. But theory can only take understanding so far. True scientific comprehension requires direct observation and, when possible, practical experience. Ethan felt his mouth go dry as he began to understand where this was leading. Zafira, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? She rose from her chair with fluid grace, moving closer until he could feel the warmth radiating from her luminescent skin. I am proposing a collaborative research project, she said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I wish to understand human intimacy not just intellectually but experientially, and of all the humans on this station, you are the one I find most compatible. The moment of truth, Ethan's scientific mind raced through the implications while his body responded to her proximity with entirely unscientific enthusiasm. Zafira, this would be highly irregular. Cross-species relationships are uncharted territory. We don't even know if we're biologically compatible. Which is precisely why research is necessary, she replied, reaching out to trace a finger along his jawline. Her touch sent shivers through him, and he watched in fascination as her skin patterns brightened at the contact. I have been studying human anatomy for months, Ethan. I am confident that our species are more compatible than initial observations might suggest. He caught her hand, marveling at how perfectly it fit in his. And what about the emotional component you've been so curious about? This isn't just about biology for humans. Zafira's expression softened, and for a moment the brilliant scientist disappeared, replaced by something more vulnerable and achingly honest. That is what intrigues me most, she admitted. In the weeks we have worked together, I have found myself experiencing sensations I do not fully understand. When you look at me, when you smile, when our hands accidentally touch during our experiments, my people do not typically form attachments to other species, yet I find myself drawn to you in ways that transcend scientific curiosity. Crossing the line. The admission hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Ethan felt his resolve crumble as he looked into her luminous eyes and saw his own growing feelings reflected there. Slowly giving her every opportunity to change her mind, he leaned forward until their faces were mere inches apart. Are you certain about this? He whispered against her lips. I have never been more certain of anything, she breathed, and then she closed the distance between them. Their first kiss was electric, literally in Zafira's case. Her luminescent patterns blazed brighter as their lips met, and Ethan felt a tingling sensation that seemed to resonate through every nerve in his body. Her lips were impossibly soft and warm, with a subtle sweetness that was utterly intoxicating. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. Zafira's skin was now pulsing with waves of golden light, and her eyes had deepened to a rich amber that seemed to glow from within. Fascinating, she murmured, her voice husky with newfound desire. The neurochemical cascade is even more intense than my research predicted. Ethan couldn't help but laugh. Even now you're analyzing the experience? Forgive me, Zephyra said, though her smile was anything but apologetic. It is difficult to abandon scientific observation when the subject matter is so stimulating. She pressed closer to him, her luminescent skin warm against his body through the thin fabric of his shirt. Perhaps, she whispered, her breath tickling his ear, we should continue this research in a more private setting? The invitation Ethan's pulse pounded as the full implications of her suggestion sank in. This brilliant, beautiful alien wanted to explore human intimacy with him, wanted to bridge the gap between their species through the most fundamental of connections. The scientist in him recognized the unprecedented opportunity for discovery, while the man in him responded to her obvious desire with fierce want. My quarters or yours? He asked, his voice rough with anticipation. Mine, Zephyra replied without hesitation. Villani environmental controls allow for more flexibility in atmospheric conditions, and privacy is assured. As they left the laboratory together, Ethan caught a glimpse of their reflection in the polished metal walls. The contrast was striking, his human form solid and earthbound beside her ethereal, luminescent beauty. They looked like beings from different worlds, which of course they were. But there was something in the way they moved together, the unconscious synchronization of their steps that suggested a deeper compatibility. The corridor seemed longer than usual as they made their way to the Villani section of the station. Other crew members they passed offered polite nods, unaware that they were witnessing the beginning of what might be the first romantic relationship between their species. At the entrance to her quarters, Zephyra paused, her hand on the bioscanner. Ethan, she said softly, once we cross this threshold, everything changes. Are you prepared for that? He looked into her luminous eyes and saw his own desire reflected there, along with something deeper, more profound. With you? I'm ready. For anything. The door slid open with a soft whisper, and they stepped together into uncharted territory. Sanctuary of Light, Zephyra's quarters were unlike any human living space Ethan had ever seen. The walls seemed to breathe with soft bioluminescence, creating an atmosphere that was both alien and intimate. Crystalline formations grew from the ceiling like inverted gardens, casting dancing patterns of light across surfaces that seemed to shift between solid and translucent. The air itself felt different, charged with an energy that made his skin tingle. Your people certainly know how to create beautiful spaces, Ethan said, his voice hushed in the ethereal environment. Beauty is essential to Villani well-being, Zephyra replied, moving to adjust controls that dimmed the ambient lighting to a warm, golden glow. We believe that one's environment should nourish both body and spirit. She turned to face him, and, in the softer light, her luminescent pattern seemed more pronounced, more beautiful. They pulsed gently with her heartbeat, creating a hypnotic display that drew his gaze like a moth to flame. Are you nervous? She asked, her amber eyes studying. His face with that familiar scientific intensity tempered now by something warmer, more personal. Honestly? Yes, Ethan admitted, but not in a bad way. This is all new territory for me too. The Villani approach to intimacy. Zephyra moved closer, her movements fluid and graceful. Among my people, intimacy begins with the sharing of light, she explained, raising her hands toward his face. May I show you? At his nod, she placed her palms gently against his temples. The moment her skin made contact, Ethan gasped. Warmth flooded through him, not just physical but emotional, as if he could suddenly feel her feelings overlaying his own. Wonder, curiosity, desire, and underneath it all, a growing affection that mirrored his own developing feelings. Incredible, he breathed, his eyes closing as waves of sensation washed over him. I can feel what you're feeling. And you, Zephyra whispered, her voice filled with awe. Your emotions are so vivid, so complex. Humans experience desire with such intensity. Through their connection, Ethan could sense her fascination with his human responses, but also her own awakening passion. The clinical scientist was giving way to something more primal, more honest. Breaking down barriers in my research, Zephyra said softly, her hands still resting against his face. I learned that humans use touch to communicate emotion. Show me. Ethan reached up to cover her hands with his own, marveling at how perfectly they fit together despite their different origins. Then, slowly, he let his hands trace down her arms, feeling the subtle texture of her luminescent skin. Where he touched, her light patterns brightened, creating trails of golden fire that followed his caresses. Your skin is remarkable, he murmured, watching in fascination as colors shifted and danced beneath his fingertips. It responds to touch like a living canvas. It responds to you, Zephyra corrected, her voice catching slightly as his hands found the curve of her waist. Villani's skin is sensitive to emotional resonance. The stronger the connection, the brighter the display. As if to prove her point, her entire form blazed brighter as he pulled her closer, their bodies fitting together with surprising compatibility. Through their continued connection, he could feel her amazement at how natural this felt. How right. The scientist becomes the subject. I have studied human courtship rituals extensively, Zephyra said, her breathing becoming more rapid as Ethan's hands explored the elegant lines of her form. But experiencing them is entirely different from observing them. What did your research tell you about kissing? Ethan asked, his lips hovering near hers. That it serves multiple functions, she replied, her scientific mind still working even, as passion clouded her amber eyes. Bonding, arousal, emotional communication. And what does it tell you now? He whispered against her lips. That research is a poor substitute for experience, she breathed, and then their mouths met again. This time the kiss was deeper, more urgent. Zephyra's luminescent patterns blazed like small suns as she pressed against him, her alien anatomy fitting against his human form with remarkable compatibility. Her lips were soft and warm, with that same subtle sweetness he'd noticed before, but now there were undertones of something more complex, more intoxicating. Discovering compatibility as their embrace deepened, Ethan became aware of how perfectly their bodies complemented each other. Zephyra's form was both familiar and exotic, with curves and contours that seemed designed to fit against him. Her skin was impossibly soft, and everywhere they touched, light bloomed between them like living aurora. Your research was right about human response to touch, Ethan murmured against her neck, his lips finding the pulse point where her luminescent patterns converged. But did it mention how addictive it could be? Zephyra's laugh was like music, rich and warm. That was not covered in the academic literature, she admitted, her hands tangling in his hair as he continued his exploration of her glowing skin. Perhaps we are discovering new data. The first of many discoveries, I hope, Ethan said, pulling back to look into her eyes. What he saw there took his breath away. The cool scientific observer was gone, replaced by a being alive with passion and wonder. When worlds collide, Ethan, Zephyra whispered, her voice thick with desire. I want to understand everything. Show me how humans love. The word hung between them, loaded with implications that went far beyond their original research agreement. Love, not just physical compatibility or scientific curiosity, but the deep emotional connection that made humans unique among the species of the galaxy. Are you sure? He asked, searching her luminous gaze. This changes everything between us. Everything has already changed, she replied, her hands framing his face. From the moment we first touched, from the first time you looked at me not as an alien specimen, but as a being worthy of respect and desire. I have been lost to you since then. Her honesty undid him. With reverent care, he began to explore the fastenings of her flowing garments, marveling as the fabric seemed to dissolve at his touch, apparently responding to her emotional state. What was revealed took his breath away. Alien beauty revealed. Zephyra's form was a masterpiece of alien evolution, combining familiar feminine curves with exotic details that spoke of her otherworldly origin. Her luminescent patterns extended across her entire body, creating intricate designs that pulsed and shifted with her emotions. She was art come to life, a living constellation that had somehow found its way into his arms. "You're beautiful," he breathed, his hands tracing the patterns of light that decorated her skin like living tattoos. "As are you," she replied, her own hands working at his more mundane human clothing. "Your species may lack bioluminescence, but there is something equally compelling about human form. Solid, substantial, reassuring." When they finally came together, skin to skin, the contact was electric. Zephyr's patterns blazed so brightly that the room filled with golden light, and Ethan felt every nerve ending come alive with sensation. Through their continued mental connection, he could feel her wonder at the experience, her amazement at how perfectly they fit together despite their different origins. The moment of truth. "This may feel different than what you're used to." Ethan warned gently, his hands steady and reassuring as they explored her alien form. "Different is good," Zephyra whispered back, her luminescent skin painting them both in warm golden light. "Different is discovery." Their coming together was a slow dance of exploration and wonder. Every touch revealed new compatibilities, new ways their different biologies could create harmony. Zephyra's responses were both alien and achingly familiar, her gasps and sighs creating a symphony that needed no translation. Through their mental link, Ethan could feel her amazement at the intensity of human physical connection, while she shared with him the Vellani experience of emotional resonance made manifest in light and energy. They were not just joining bodies, but bridging worlds, creating something entirely new between their species. Research becomes reality. "I never imagined." Zephyra gasped as they moved together in increasingly urgent rhythm, her entire form now blazing like a small star. That physical sensation could be so intense. "And I never imagined," Ethan replied, his voice rough with emotion, "that intimacy could involve sharing thoughts and feelings so directly." They brought out the best in each other's biology, human endurance combining with Vellani sensitivity to create experiences neither had thought possible. When release finally claimed them, Zephyra's light exploded outward in patterns so complex and beautiful that Ethan felt tears spring to his eyes. In the aftermath, as they lay entwined in the soft glow of her gradually calming luminescence, Ethan realized that something fundamental had shifted between them. This was no longer about research or curiosity or even desire. This was about love. Part 3. When science meets passion morning after revelations, Ethan woke to the gentle pulse of bioluminescent light filtering through what passed for windows in Zephyra's quarters. Her form was curled against his, skin still, glowing softly in the aftermath of their night together. As consciousness returned, so did the full impact of what had transpired between them. "Good morning," Zephyra murmured against his chest, her voice carrying a contentment he'd never heard before. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," Ethan admitted, his arms tightening around her luminescent form. "Though I keep expecting to wake up and find this was all a dream." She lifted her head to look at him, amber eyes sparkling with amusement and something deeper. "If this is a dream, then I prefer it to reality, the science of love." Over the days that followed, their relationship evolved beyond the physical into something richer and more complex. They continued their official research, but now their discussions carried intimate undertones born of personal experience. "I have been analyzing the neurochemical changes in my own system," Zephyra said one morning as they shared breakfast in her quarters. "The Vellani equivalent of what humans call love produces fascinating biochemical cascades." "You're studying your own feelings?" Ethan asked, charmed by her inability to completely abandon her scientific nature even in matters of the heart. "Of course," she replied with a smile that made her skin pulse with warm golden light. "How else can I properly document this unprecedented interspecies bonding? Though I confess the subject matter makes objective analysis challenging. Challenges from above their growing relationship didn't go unnoticed by the station's command structure. Commander Torres called Ethan to his office 3 weeks into their liaison, his expression carefully neutral, but his concern evident. "Dr. Cross," Torres began without preamble, "I need to ask about your relationship with the Vellani researcher." Ethan straightened in his chair, prepared for this conversation. "Zephyra and I have developed a personal relationship alongside our professional collaboration, yes, sir. And you understand the implications? The potential complications for the alliance for both our species? With respect, Commander, I believe our relationship demonstrates the potential for deeper cooperation between humans and Vellani. We've proven that meaningful connections are possible across species lines." Torres studied him for a long moment. "The Vellani delegation has made no complaints. In fact, they seem fascinated by what you two represent. But Ethan, you're venturing into uncharted territory. Be careful." Vellani perspectives. That evening, Zephyra shared her own conversations with her people. "My research supervisor believes our bonding represents a significant breakthrough in interspecies relations," she said, as they walked through the station's observation deck. "Though she warns that not all Vellani will be as accepting of cross-species relationships." "And how do you feel about that?" Ethan asked, taking her hand as they gazed out at the stars. "I feel that love recognizes no boundaries of species or worlds," Zephyra replied simply. "What we have discovered together is too precious to be diminished by the fears of others." Deepening connection, as weeks turned to months, their bond only strengthened. They learned each other's languages, customs, and dreams. Ethan discovered that Vellani courtship involved the sharing of life memories through their natural telepathic abilities, while Zephyra marveled at human traditions of gift-giving and romantic gestures. "Your species has such beautiful ways of expressing affection," she said one evening, examining a bouquet of earth flowers he'd managed to obtain from the hydroponics bay. "These have no practical purpose, yet they communicate volumes about your feelings." "Beauty for beauty's sake," Ethan explained, tucking one of the flowers behind where her ear would be if she were human. "Sometimes the most important things in life serve no practical purpose except to make us happy." Official recognition. Their relationship eventually gained official recognition from both governments, making them the first officially recognized interspecies couple in the alliance. The ceremony blended human and Vellani traditions, taking place in a specially designed chamber that could accommodate both species' needs. "By joining together," the Vellani elder intoned, her luminescent patterns creating complex ceremonial displays. "You forge bonds not just between individuals but between peoples. May your love serve as a bridge between worlds," added the human chaplain, "and may it inspire others to look beyond surface differences, to find the common heart that beats in all sentient beings." Legacy of love years later, as their relationship became the foundation for a new era of human-Vellani cooperation. Ethan and Zephyra would look back on their first meeting with wonder. What had begun as a simple research assignment had blossomed into something that changed not just their lives, but the trajectory of two civilizations. "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan asked one evening as they watched their hybrid offspring play in the specially designed nursery that had become another marvel of interspecies cooperation. "Regret discovering that love knows no boundaries?" Zephyra replied, her patterns glowing with the contentment that had become her default state. "Regret, proving that understanding between species is not just possible but inevitable when hearts are open? Never." Their children, unique beings who carried the best of both species, were already showing promise as natural ambassadors between the human and Vellani peoples. They could glow like their mother, but thought with the complexity of their father, bridges made flesh between two worlds. The endless story continues, as they stood together on the observation deck where they'd shared so many conversations, watching new ships arrive carrying the next generation of interspecies researchers and explorers. Ethan realized that their story was just the beginning. Other couples were forming, other bridges being built between species that had once seemed impossibly different. The galaxy was becoming a smaller, more connected place, one relationship at a time. "What do you think our legacy will be?" Ethan asked, holding Zephyra close as their luminescent children played at their feet. "That love is the universal constant," she replied, her patterns pulsing with deep satisfaction. that when we look beyond fear and difference, we find that all sentient beings share the same fundamental desires for connection, understanding, and acceptance. She turned in his arms, amber eyes reflecting the stars beyond the viewport. And that sometimes, the most important research we can do is into our own hearts. Their kiss, witnessed by the cosmos itself, sealed not just their love but the promise of a future where the barriers between species would continue to fall, one heart at a time. The story that had begun with scientific curiosity had become a testament to the power of love to bridge any distance, overcome any difference, and unite beings across the vast expanse of space. In the end, Sapphira had indeed learned about human mating practices, but she had discovered something far more valuable, that love, in all its forms, was the most powerful force in the universe, capable of transforming not just individuals, but entire civilizations. And their love story continued to inspire others, proving that when different worlds collide with open hearts and curious minds, the result isn't destruction, but creation of something beautiful, new, and infinitely precious. The end.